Final Buzzer. Final Buzzer. A standalone sports romance. Fallon Greystone. Copyright 2026 Fallon Greystone. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except for brief quotations in a book review. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. First edition, 2026. For everyone who ever fell and got back up. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Alan Watts. Contents. Prologue. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Chapter 14. Chapter 5. Chapter 16. Chapter 17. Chapter 8. Chapter 19. Chapter 10. Chapter 11. Chapter 12. Chapter 13. Chapter 15. Chapter 18. Chapter 22. Chapter 21. Chapter 23. Chapter 24. Prologue. Cole. The ice talks to me at 5 a.m. Not in words. More like a low hum beneath my skates, a vibration that moves up my legs and settles somewhere behind my ribs. Like the building itself is breathing. Like it knows I'm here and it's deciding what to do about that. Nobody else is here. That's the point. I push off the boards and let myself glide. No drills. No targets. No coach watching from the tunnel with his arms crossed and his clipboard and that face he makes when he thinks I'm not giving everything. Just me and 12,000 square feet of silence and the kind of dark that only exists at the edge of something ending. I've been doing this since freshman year. Coming here before the lights. Before the team. Before I have to be the thing everyone needs me to be. My shoulder aches on the first full extension. I don't adjust. I don't baby it. I just let it hurt and keep moving because that's the only language I know. 1 circle. 2. The boards blur at the edge of my vision. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being captain: the title doesn't feel like power. It feels like a rope tied around your chest. And every person who calls your name is holding a piece of it. Your coach. Your team. Your father. And every time they pull, you smile, and you lean into it because you're Cole Mercer and that's what Cole Mercer does. I stop at center ice. Stand still. The hum is louder here. Or maybe I just finally stopped moving long enough to hear it. I've got 12 games left. 12 chances to do the thing the school has been building me towards since I was 14 years old, and some scout saw me at a regional qualifier and told my father, not me, my father, that I had the kind of hands that only came around once in a generation. My father shook the man's hand and nodded like he'd already known. Like I was a project he'd completed. Like the scout was just confirming his math. I was standing right there. Neither of them looked at me. I dragged the blade of my skate across the ice in a slow arc, watched the shaving curl up white and disappear. 12 games. And then, what? The question I can't say out loud to anyone because the moment I say it, it becomes real and I don't know if I'm ready for it to be real. What happens to Cole Mercer when there's no more ice to stand on? My phone buzzes in my jacket pocket. I already know who it is before I look. Dad. 5:03 a.m. I let it ring. The echo of the vibration bounces off the boards and comes back at me, and I just stand there at center ice in the dark and let it. When it stops, I breathe out slow. Watch my breath cloud in front of my face and dissolve. I used to love this. That's the part that hurts the most, honestly. Not the shoulder. Not my father. Not the thing I found out about Coach Hargrove, not the girl sitting in the press box with her notebook who sees more than she's supposed to see. Not even the fact that this is my last season and I can feel it ending the way you feel a storm before the rain hits, in your joints, in the back of your throat. What hurts is that I used to step onto this ice and feel free. And I can't remember exactly when that stopped. The overhead lights click on. Loud. White. Sudden. The whole rink snaps into focus at once, the boards, the lines painted under my skates, the banners hanging from the rafters with years and championships spelled out in Frost Academy navy and gold. My name isn't up there yet. It will be, after this season. That's what everyone says. I look at those banners for a long moment. Then I look down at center ice. At the frost crest painted beneath me. At my skates planted on either side of it like I own this place. I don't own anything. I'm 18 years old and everything I am is borrowed. The Zamboni door opens at the far end. Marcus, the overnight rink manager, rolls out with his coffee and sees me and raises the cup in a tired salute. He doesn't ask why I'm here this early. He never does. I think he figures it out on his own. I nod back. Then I dig my blade in, push hard off my back foot, and start moving again. 12 games. One shoulder that has no business being on the ice. One girl who is going to find the real story whether I help her or not. One father who already has my future in a folder with my name on the tab. And one question I've been skating around since September that I'm running out of ice to avoid. I used to think the buzzer was just a sound. Now I know better. It's the truest thing in the world, because it doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't care about your shoulder or your father or the things you never said to the people who deserve to hear them. It just counts down to 0 and then it sounds, and whatever you built either holds or it doesn't. 5 months. The ice hums under me. I skate faster. End of. Chapter 1. Avery. I had a plan. 5 months. One story. 0 complications. Graduate with the National Journalism Award, the fellowship, and my dignity intact. Leave Frost Academy exactly the way I arrived, on my own terms, carrying my own weight, owing nothing to nobody. I made it 4 hours into senior year before the plan started bleeding. My duffel bag was still half unzipped on my bed when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Petra Walsh, editor, The Frost Chronicle. I let it ring twice because I already knew what she wanted and I needed 2 seconds to decide how I felt about it. I picked up on the third. Tell me it's the arts feature, I said. Tell me it's the piece on the new ceramics teacher. It's the hockey team. Petra didn't even pause. Full season coverage. Championship run. I need someone who can actually write and you're the only one on staff who won't turn it into a fan letter. I sat down on my bed. Through the window, I could already see the rink lights burning white against the January dark. It was 6 in the evening. Nobody should have been in there yet. Petra. Avery. I have the nomination piece to finish. The one that could actually win us something nationally. This is the nomination piece. Her voice had that tone she got when she'd already decided and was just waiting for me to catch up. Sports journalism is having a moment. Human interest angle. The last season of a championship program. I already pitched it to the national committee and they want a preview by February. I looked at the rink lights. Kept looking. Who's my primary subject? She didn't answer fast enough. Petra. Who? Cole Mercer, she said. Obviously. I closed my eyes. Obviously. Fine, I said. I knew you'd be reasonable. I'm not being reasonable. I'm being strategic. There's a difference. She laughed and hung up. That was Petra, she treated conversations like transactions. Get the yes, end the call, move on. I'd spent 3 years learning from her and now I did the same thing and I wasn't sure if that was growth or damage. I set my phone down and looked around my room. Same room I'd had since sophomore year, single occupancy, journalism honors perk, 3rd floor of Callahan Hall. My bookshelf was the first thing I'd unpacked, which said everything about me that needed saying. Books arranged by author, notebooks stacked by date. My laptop on the desk, already open, already charged. I was ready. I was always ready. That was the problem. I stood up and went to the window. The rink sat 200 yards from my building, squat and gray under the January sky, lights blazing through the high windows like the building was awake in a way the rest of campus wasn't. School didn't officially start until tomorrow. I'd come back early, I always came back early, and apparently so had someone else. I didn't have to guess who. I'd been telling myself for 2 years that Cole Mercer was just a subject. Interesting the way any complex person was interesting. Worth observing the way anything worth writing about was worth observing. I had notes. Not for the paper, just notes, in a private notebook I kept separate from everything else, black cover, no label. Notes about the way he stood at center ice after wins like he was waiting for the feeling to arrive. Notes about how he shook hands with the opposing team and meant it every time. Notes about the gap between the Cole Mercer everyone saw and the one I'd accidentally caught glimpses of, quieter, sharper, something careful behind the easy confidence. Journalistic observation. That was all it was. That's what I told myself, anyway. I pulled the window shut and went back to my bed and unzipped the rest of my bag. I put things away in their right places. I made a list of what I needed to do before tomorrow. I did not look out the window again. I looked out the window one more time. The lights were still on. I picked up my notebook, the work one, the labeled one, and wrote at the top of a fresh page, Frost Hockey, Final Season. Primary subject, CM. Not his name. Just initials. I told myself that was professional. I capped the pen and went to find Juno before I could talk myself into anything stupid. The rink lights were still on when I fell asleep that night. I know because I checked. Chapter 2. Cole. There's a version of the captain's speech I've given every year. It's not written down anywhere. It doesn't need to be. It lives in my chest like muscle memory, same rhythm, same beats, same places where I pause to let the weight of something land. Freshman year I heard it from the senior captain before me and I stored it the way you store something you know you're going to need later. Stored the pauses. Stored the look he gave us from the front of the room before he said a single word, the one that made 30 guys go quiet without being asked. I've given that speech twice now. Tonight was the third time. Same locker room. Same fold-out chairs arranged in a half circle. Same smell, rubber and steel and something underneath it that I couldn't name but that I knew meant this is real, this is happening, this is the one you'll remember. 22 guys. Some of them I'd played with for 3 years. Some of them I was still learning. I stood at the front and I waited until the room went quiet. Then I said, I'm not going to talk about winning. That got their attention. The freshmen especially, you could see it on their faces. That wasn't what they expected. Every team in this league wants to win. Every captain in this league is standing in front of his guys right now saying the same things. The championship. The program. The legacy. I let that sit for a second. That's not what this season is. Not for us. Dex was watching me from the second row with his arms crossed. He had this small expression he made when he was paying close attention, almost nothing, just a slight tightening at the corner of his mouth. I'd known him for 4 years and I was probably the only one who could read it. This team is 12 guys graduating in May, I said. Some of you are coming back next year and some of you are not. Either way, this is the last time this group plays together. Not the last time you play hockey. The last time this exists. And that means every practice, every game, every shift, you're either making something worth having or you're wasting the only version of this you get. The room was dead quiet. We play for each other, I said. Not for the banner. The banner's just what's left when the team is gone. We play for the thing that doesn't get hung on a wall. I stopped. 30 seconds of silence. Then I said, practice is at 6 tomorrow. Tape up tonight. Sleep. People started moving. The noise came back in pieces, chairs scraping, lockers opening, someone's phone buzzing. I stepped back and let it happen. Dex caught my eye and gave me one nod. I nodded back. That was enough. I waited until most of them were gone before I sat down on the bench in the back corner and started unwrapping my shoulder. The tape from this morning was already pulling at the edges. I worked at it slow and careful, the way you do something you don't want anyone to see. The shoulder had been bad since October. Not broke bad, not surgery bad, the team doctor had been carefully not using those words, which meant we were both pretending we had options we didn't actually have. I could play. It hurt to play. I was going to play anyway. That was the whole of it. I retaped it tighter than the morning. Pressed down on the outside of the joint and waited for the ache to settle into something manageable. It took about a minute. I'd gotten good at waiting. I was reaching for my jacket when I heard it, a small sound, not quite a footstep. I looked up. Liam Croft was standing in the doorway. Sophomore. Forward. Fast as hell and knew it. He'd been at Frost 1 year and he'd already started the kind of low conversations that players started when they thought a spot might open up. Not loud. Not direct. That wasn't how it worked at this level. Just present. Always slightly more present than he needed to be. He was looking at my shoulder. Not at my face. At my shoulder. At the fresh tape. At my hand still pressed against the joint. "You need something?" I said. He looked up. His face rearranged itself into something neutral, almost polite. "Just forgot my water bottle." He crossed to his locker, opened it, took out the bottle. Didn't rush. Didn't look at me again either, which was worse than if he had. He pulled the locker shut, tucked the bottle under his arm. "Good speech," he said at the door. "Go sleep, Croft." He left. I sat there for a moment with my hand on my shoulder and the empty locker room around me and the overhead light buzzing faintly in the ceiling. He'd seen it. I didn't know what he was going to do with that yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe he was exactly what he looked like, a hungry sophomore who wanted more ice time and was paying attention to everything because that's how hungry players operated. Or maybe he was the first thing that could unravel everything before the season even found its legs. I finished dressing. Turned off the back lights. Walked out through the tunnel and into the cold. 12 games. I started counting things I couldn't afford to lose. Chapter 3. Avery. I showed up to the rink at 4 o'clock with my recorder, my notebook, and what I thought was a professional attitude. He was already there. Not on the ice, just sitting in the first row of the bleachers closest to the boards, still in his jacket, looking at the empty rink the way people looked at things they were trying to memorize. He didn't hear me come in. I stood in the tunnel entrance for about 3 seconds and watched him watch the ice, and I thought, this is what the real story looks like. Right here. This exact thing. Then I made myself walk in and sit 2 rows behind him and I said, "Cole Mercer." He turned around. He didn't seem surprised. He just looked at me for a second with those eyes that were always doing more than they were supposed to, taking things in, measuring, deciding, and then he nodded once like we'd already agreed on something. "Avery Callahan," he said. "You know my name. You won the Regional Press Award last year. Your piece on the school's budget cuts ran in 3 outside papers." He turned forward again, back to the ice. I read it. I hadn't expected that. I sat down in the row behind him and put my notebook on my knee and clicked my recorder on and set it on the bleacher between us. The sound of it clicking felt very loud in the empty rink. "This okay?" I said. He looked at the recorder. "Sure." I flipped to a clean page. I'd prepared 6 questions, structured, angled, the kind that opened doors without showing your hand. I'd practiced them in my room that morning. I asked none of them. Instead I said, "What does Frost mean to you?" He was quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone was thinking about a good answer. The other kind. The kind that meant the answer was already there and the person was deciding whether to give it to you. "It's almost over," he said. 3 words. I wrote them down. Stared at them on the page. He wasn't looking at me. He was still looking at the ice. "That's it," I said. "You asked what it means to me. That's what it means. 4 years and 12 games and then it's done." He paused. "Everything I've been since I was 14 is almost over. I'm not being dramatic. That's just true. And what comes after? That's not your question to ask yet." I looked up from my notebook. He was watching me now. Not aggressive, just direct. The way people looked at you when they were tired of performing and had decided to just be where they were for a minute. "Okay," I said. "Okay. I'll come back to it." He almost smiled. "Not quite." "Fair enough." We stayed there another hour. He answered the surface questions, season goals, team dynamics, his history at Frost. Good quotes, clean answers, the kind of thing that filled column inches without actually revealing anything. He was good at it. I'd interviewed enough people to know the difference between someone who was thoughtful and someone who was managed, and Cole Mercer was both at once, which was the most interesting and most frustrating combination. At the end I clicked off the recorder and put it in my bag. Same time Thursday, I said. I've got practice until 5:30 then. He nodded. I walked back across the rink floor and through the tunnel and out into the cold. The main path back to the dorms cut past the library and the old chapel, and I walked it without really seeing any of it because I was thinking about 3 words written in my notebook. It's almost over. The problem, the real problem, the one I'd been circling since Petra called, wasn't that the story would be hard to get. It was the opposite. Cole Mercer was going to be the most natural thing I'd ever written, and I knew it after 40 minutes in a cold rink and 3 words that should have been nothing and weren't. I was in trouble. Not the normal kind. The kind that started quiet and grew in the dark, and by the time you noticed it, it was already too late to pretend you hadn't. I got back to my room and opened my laptop and created a new folder. Named it Frost Hockey, Final Season. Then I opened a second folder and paused with my hands on the keys. I named the second one Other. Then I opened a new document and typed at the top, "It's almost over." I stared at it. Closed the laptop. Opened it again and kept writing. Chapter 14. Cole. Something came loose after the Harwick game. I don't know how else to say it. Something that had been wound tight in me for so long I'd stopped feeling it as separate from myself just loosened. Like a skate lace that had been double knotted for years and someone had finally worked the knot free. It showed up in the strangest places. Tuesday practice. Hargrove was running structured drills, the kind I could do in my sleep, had done in my sleep, had been doing since I was 12 years old. 2-on-1, neutral zone entry, breakout patterns. Routine. I ran them correctly and efficiently the way I always did. And then somewhere in the middle of the 3rd repetition I stopped running them correctly and efficiently. I made a play that wasn't in the drill. It wasn't a risky play, it was better than the play the drill called for, cleaner, and it worked. But it came from somewhere different than usual. Not from the captain brain that processed and decided and executed in that smooth mechanical way I'd trained myself toward. It came from something older than that. Something I recognized from when I was 8 years old on the outdoor rink behind my grandmother's house, that pure animal thing of I see the space, I'm going into the space, no processing required. Dex caught my eye across the ice. He tilted his head. Barely. What was that? I shrugged. Don't know. He almost smiled. It happened again on Thursday. And at the Millbrook warm-up. And by the second period of the Millbrook game itself I'd stopped trying to understand it and just let it happen, which was terrifying and natural in equal measure. We won by 2. I had 1 goal and 1 assist and played 40 minutes of the best hockey of my senior year. In the locker room after, Dex sat next to me and said nothing for a while. He had a specific silence for things he was turning over, waited, attentive. I'd learned to just wait in it. The 3rd period shift, he finally said. Yeah. That wasn't the play Hargrove called. No. It was better. I know. He looked at me sideways. You look different out there this week. Different how? Like you're enjoying it. I thought about that. About whether it was accurate. About the roof and the cold wall and the 4 days since that I'd been spending partially on the ice and partially elsewhere, and whether those 2 things were connected. Maybe I am, I said. Dex nodded. Like this was a reasonable thing. Like it wasn't the first time I'd said anything like it in 4 years. I showered and got dressed and came out to the corridor where Avery was waiting with her recorder and her notebook and that expression she wore when she'd already seen something and was deciding how to use it. We did the post-game thing, quotes, observations, the shape of the win. I gave her real answers. I always gave her real answers now. I didn't know when that had become the default, but it had. She walked back across the quad with me, not on purpose, our routes just happened to overlap for about 300 yards. We talked about the Millbrook second period, about whether their defensive line was going to be a problem when we met them again in the bracket. Professional. Clean. At the point where the paths divided, she stopped. That third period shift, she said. Dex said the same thing. I was watching. She had the notebook against her chest, not open. You looked like you did the first time I wrote about you. I looked at her. How did I look then? She thought about it. Like the game was somewhere you went instead of something you did. She paused. Like you were glad to be there. Specifically. Not just present. I didn't say anything for a second. Yeah, I said. That's what it felt like. She held my gaze for a moment, that same 2 seconds, the same as the press box on the first day of practice, neither of us breaking first. Except now it meant something different than it had then. Now it meant we both knew what was on the other side of it and were choosing, again, to stand there instead of walking through. Good, she said. Then she took the left path and I stood there watching her go with the cold coming in off the fields and my shoulder aching at a solid 4 out of 10, which tonight felt manageable. I turned right. Got back to the dorm. Was almost to my room when I saw Liam Croft coming out of the weight room at the end of the corridor. 9:45 at night, after a game, 2 hours after the rest of the team had gone to eat and sleep. His hair was wet, he was still flushed, and he had his training bag over one shoulder. He saw me. Late session. I said. Yeah. He wasn't apologetic about it. That was one thing I'd come to understand about Liam Croft, he didn't perform humility he didn't feel. He was just honest about being hungry, which was its own kind of respect. Game footage got me thinking. Anything specific? He looked at me for a second. Direct, measuring, his version of the look I gave people, just younger, still working out how much of it to show. Your reads in the third period, he said. The way you were processing, I want to understand the logic. When to push for the shot and when to feed it. I've been getting it wrong. You've been getting it right more than you haven't. I want to get it right more than that. I looked at him. At 19 years old with his wet hair and his gym bag and his completely uncomplicated desire to be better. No ego about it. No politics. Just the work. Come to the early skate Thursday, I said. 6 a.m. Just the two of us. I'll walk you through it. He blinked. One fast beat of surprise he couldn't quite contain. Then it was gone and the direct expression was back. Yeah. Okay. Sleep first. Yeah. He shifted his bag. Thanks. He walked past me toward his room. I stood in the corridor for a second. I hadn't planned to say that. It came from the same place the third period shift had come from, that loosened thing, that space where the tight control used to be. The instinct to hold everything close was still there, was always going to be there. But something else was there now too. I went into my room and sat on my bed and thought about all of it, the shift, Avery on the path, Liam in the corridor, the way it had felt to play tonight. For the first time in as long as I could remember, the shoulder was the least important thing in the room. That felt like progress. It also felt like something was coming that would test it. I lay down. Stared at the ceiling. Listened to the building settle in the cold. Somewhere across the quad, in a room I'd never been inside, Avery Callahan was sitting at her desk with her notebooks and her careful words and the thing neither of us had spoken about since a Friday night rooftop in the dark. I fell asleep thinking about Thursday. And the Thursday after that. And whatever was going to happen when all of this caught up to us. End of Chapter 5. Avery. I lasted 6 days before Juno found the notebook. Not the work one. The other one. The black one with no label that I kept in the second drawer of my desk under 2 textbooks and a power bank I'd never used. I'd had that notebook since sophomore year. I'd been careful with it. I'd been careful the way you were careful with something you couldn't quite bring yourself to throw away and couldn't quite bring yourself to explain. Juno found it on a Tuesday. We were in the dining hall for the late dinner slot, trays across from each other, and I was telling her about the Thursday interview in a controlled, professional way that I'd rehearsed slightly. The rink, the bleachers, the recorder. His quotes. His general cooperativeness. The story's early shape. Juno let me talk for about 45 seconds. Then she said, "You've been writing about him since sophomore year." I kept my face still. I don't know what you mean. Black notebook. No label. Second drawer. She picked up her fork. I read it sophomore year. I borrowed your power bank and I found it and I read it and then I put it back and I never told you. She stabbed a piece of chicken. Sorry. Not sorry. The dining hall noise continued around us, trays, voices, someone laughing too loud near the windows. I looked at Juno and she looked back at me with that open expression she had, the one that meant she'd already done the calculations and decided honesty was the shortest route. You read my private notebook, I said. I did. That's a significant violation. Yes, it is. You should feel bad about that. I feel medium bad. Mostly I feel like it explains a lot. She set down her fork. Avery. Those pages about him, the way you write about him, that's not journalism notes. That's not even character notes. That's a person writing about another person because she can't stop thinking about them. It was observation. You wrote about the way he shook hands with the other team's captain after a loss and how he looked like the loneliest person in a full arena. She tilted her head. Journalistic observation. I looked at my food. It doesn't matter, I said. Because I'm covering him this season and I need to be objective and what's in that notebook stays in that notebook. I picked up my fork. I know the rules. I set the rules. I will follow the rules. Juno was quiet for a second. Okay, she said. Okay. I believe you. Thank you. I also think you're going to have a really hard 5 months. I pointed my fork at her. I need you to not do that. Do what? That thing you do where you're nice about being right. She smiled. It was a good smile, warm, a little sad, the kind that meant she actually cared about the thing she was saying. That was the worst part about Juno. She was never mean about being right. She just laid it out in front of you like she was doing you a favor, which she was, which made it harder to be annoyed at. Tell me the problem, she said. The real one. I put my fork down. He said 3 words in 20 minutes that were worth more than everything else combined. I said it flat. No emphasis. And he's not even trying. That's the problem. He's not performing for me or managing me or playing the press role. He just says things and they land and I write them down and when I read them back they're already the beginning of something I didn't plan to write. Juno nodded slowly. And that's a journalism problem, I said. Sure, she said. Not any other kind of problem. Absolutely. Juno. She picked her fork back up. You know what I think? I really don't want to. I think the reason you've kept that notebook for 2 years is the same reason you took this assignment without fighting harder. She shrugged. I think part of you wanted the excuse to be in the same room as him. And now you have it. And now you're terrified because the story and the reason you took the story are the same thing. The dining hall hummed. Trays and voices and the hiss of the food line. I didn't say anything for a long time. He looked back, I said finally. What? At practice. I was watching from the press box and he looked up and I didn't look away and he held it. I looked down at my tray. He held it. Juno set her fork down quietly. Avery. I know. He held it, she said softly. Not teasing. Something else. The kind of voice people used when they were watching something become real. I know, I said again. We ate. The dining hall kept moving around us. At some point Juno said something about her internship application and I talked about it with her and the conversation found its way back to normal ground, or something that looked like it. But on the walk back to the dorms she stopped outside Callahan Hall and looked at me in the cold with her breath clouding between us. You're going to have to decide, she said. Before it decides for you. She went inside. I stood there in the cold for a minute. The rink lights were visible from where I stood, white squares in the dark across the quad. Still on. Always on. I went upstairs, opened my room, went to my desk. Pulled out the black notebook from under the textbooks. Opened it to the last page. 2 years of pages. 2 years of things I called observation. I turned to a blank page. I picked up my pen. I didn't write his name. I never wrote his name in this notebook. I wrote, he held it. Then I closed it and put it back and sat at my desk for a long time before I opened the work notebook and made myself start writing something professional. The cursor on my screen blinked. Outside, across the quad, the lights were still on. End of Chapter 16. Cole. Marcus pulled me aside after practice on Thursday. Not Marcus Webb, Marcus Riley, our left wing. 3-year starter, one of the guys I'd have trusted with anything, which was why I'd kept the peace with him even as he got quieter and tighter over the last 6 weeks, and I'd pretended I didn't notice because I hadn't been ready to hear what he had to say. He was ready to say it now. "You got a minute," he said. We sat in the equipment room after everyone else had gone. He had his skates off, jacket on, and he leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor first like he was deciding where to start. "The new defensive formation Hargrove put in 2 weeks ago," he said. "The shifted triangle. It leaves Theo exposed every time we turn over in the neutral zone. Theo knows it. I know it. You know it." He looked up. "Why are we still running it?" "Hargrove says it opens the offensive end. It opens your offensive end. It creates one clear lane and it goes through you every time." His voice wasn't accusatory, just direct, which was worse in its way because it meant he'd thought about how to say this carefully. "I'm not saying that's you. I don't think you asked for it. I think it's being done and you're standing in the middle of it not knowing." I said nothing. Theo almost took a real hit 2 games ago because he was out of position the way the formation puts him. He didn't say anything because you're the captain and Hargrove's the coach and he doesn't want to make it a thing. Marcus spread his hands. "But it's a thing, Cole. It's been a thing. How many people feel this way?" He paused. "More than you'd want to hear." "Tell me anyway." 6. Maybe 7. Not angry, confused. "We've run this system for 3 years and it worked because everybody was part of it. Now it feels like," he stopped. Found the word. "Like the system got traded in for something else and nobody told us what we were trading for." I sat with that. "Why didn't anyone come to me sooner?" I said. "Because you're carrying something." He said it carefully. Evenly. "We don't know exactly what. But something. And everybody can see it and everybody's been doing the thing where you don't add weight to someone who's already loaded." The equipment room was cold. The rink hum came through the walls. "That ends now," I said. Yeah. "You see something that's wrong, you come to me. Same day. That's what the captain is for." I leaned forward. "All of you. I'd rather know and deal with it than have it running underground." He nodded. Held my gaze. "There's one more thing," he said. I waited. "Liam Croft has been putting in hours nobody asked him to put in. Extra sessions, extra film. He's not making noise about it, he's just doing the work. But it's the kind of work a player did when he thought a spot might be opening up." He looked at me levelly. "I'm not saying anything about what that means. I'm just telling you it's happening." I stood up. "I know about Liam," I said. "I've got it." He looked slightly surprised. Then he stood too. "Okay." He reached for his bag. "We want to win, Cole. All of us. That hasn't changed. We just need the system back." "I know. Give me a couple days." He left. I stayed in the equipment room alone. One conversation and the fracture was visible that had been running under everything, invisible, silent, the kind of crack you didn't see until you put weight on it. 6 or 7 guys, probably more by the end of the week when people realized it was safe to say it. Theo getting exposed on defense because the formation had been quietly redesigned around one player. And Liam Croft in the weight room at 10 o'clock at night doing the math on something I couldn't pretend I didn't understand. I pulled out my phone. Found Hargrove's number. Stared at it. Not yet. I needed to know more before I walked into that room. I needed everything in order because Hargrove was the kind of man who moved around direct confrontation the way he'd moved around my question about the gray jacket, fluid, polished, leaving you holding a different conversation than the one you brought in. I called Avery instead. She picked up on the second ring. The team knows something's wrong, I said without preamble. Not all of it. But the formation changes, they've tracked it. They know the system shifted. How many? Marcus said 6. Probably more by now. A brief silence. Are you going to confront Hargrove? I want to know everything first. All of it, Webb, the timeline, how deep this goes. I paused. You said you heard Webb mention footage. Which games specifically? He didn't list them. He said at least 3 games. The way he said it, it sounded like they'd been in contact for longer than 3 games. The private early sessions, I said. Hargrove has been running me in individual sessions since week 2. No team. Just me and the ice and him watching. Would those sessions have been recorded? The rink has overhead cameras for review footage. They're always on. I pressed my free hand to my eyes. He's been building the package since the beginning of the season. Cole. Say it. You need to tell someone with authority over Hargrove. The athletic director. The board. Her voice was steady, not clinical, just clear. The voice she used when she'd already processed the thing and was helping me catch up. This isn't just about you. He compromised the team's system for an individual showcase. That has implications for every player on that roster. I know. Whatever Webb is offering, whatever your father set in motion, that's a separate conversation. But what Hargrove did to the team is its own problem and it needs to go above him. I looked at the ceiling. If I report it, the season gets complicated. The season is already complicated. More complicated. Investigations, reviews, the team finding out the full story. The team already knows something is wrong, she said. You just told me that. The question isn't whether this comes out. It's whether it comes out on your terms or someone else's. She was right. She was completely right and she'd gotten there faster than I had because she always got to the clear version of things before me. That was what made her good, that was what I'd read in the black notebook 2 months ago and recognized as something rare. There are 6 games left, I said. I know. I need to get through 6 games. Then figure out how to do both. I put my head back against the wall. Thought about 6 games. About the team. About Marcus and Theo and the formation and Liam Croft in the weight room at 10 at night. About Hargrove's voice through a cracked door saying past the point where it matters. I need to talk to the team first, I said. Before I go above Hargrove. They deserve to hear it from me. When? Tomorrow. Before practice. I pushed off the wall and stood up. And Avery, don't publish anything yet. I know. I mean it. Not yet. I know, Cole. No impatience in it. I haven't published anything yet. I'm not going to without talking to you first. A pause. Trust goes both ways. You know that by now. I did know that. That was the one thing in the last 3 months I'd been most sure of. Chapter 17. Avery. Maya Torres walked into the Thursday guest lecture like she'd never left Frost. That was the first thing I noticed, not how she looked, not her credentials on the projected slide behind the podium, but the specific confidence of someone returning to a place that had made them. She wore it the way Frost alums always wore it, that particular ease. She'd graduated 2 years ahead of me. Sports journalism track. She'd had a piece published in a national magazine before she turned 20 and everyone who'd been on the paper when she was here still talked about it. I'd been looking forward to this lecture for 2 weeks. I sat in the 4th row with my notebook open and my pen ready and Juno in the seat beside me. Juno had no academic reason to be here and came anyway because she said she liked watching people who were good at things, which was one of the many reasons I'd kept her close for 4 years. Maya was good at things. The lecture was sharp and honest. She talked about covering athletes, about the line between access and compromise, about the specific challenge of writing the true version of someone who was used to being written about. She talked about showing up to the story even when the story was uncomfortable. I wrote 4 pages. At some point in the second half Juno stopped writing. I noticed it the way you noticed when the sound of rain stopped, not immediately, just a beat later. I looked at her. She was looking at Maya at the front of the room. Her expression was the one she reserved for situations she'd already thought through and decided the right answer to but hadn't told you yet. Closed off, careful, the face she wore when something she knew was about to become something you knew. I looked back at the podium. He's had 2 months to mention it. I turned the tap on. Turned it off. We've talked about everything. We've been inside each other's actual lives for 2 months, his fears, my notebooks, the roof, all of it. And this is something that connects the two of us, a person we both know, a thing that, I stopped again. He edits. I told him that. He said he knew. He said he was trying to stop. Maybe he forgot. He didn't forget. She looked at me for a moment. Then nodded once, slowly. Not agreeing that it was unforgivable. Agreeing that I had the right to feel the thing I was feeling. What are you going to do? She said. I turned off the tap. Dried my hands. Looked at my face in the mirror one last time and made it do what I needed it to do. Nothing dramatic, I said. I walked out. Maya was still in the corridor, talking to 2 students from the journalism track. Juno came out behind me. I got my bag from the seat where I'd left it and I walked the route I knew would take me past the library, past the rink entrance, and through the back path where Cole walked after evening practice. I found him 9 minutes later. He was coming out of the side entrance of the athletic wing, bag over one shoulder, still in training clothes, the particular after-practice version of himself, slightly tired, slightly eased, the performance dialed down the way it got when the day was functionally over. He saw me and his face opened up in that way I'd spent 4 days trying to describe and kept failing. Hey, he said. I was going to call you after dinner. You should have told me about Maya, I said. The change in his face was very fast and very complete. The openness closed, not to blank, to something more specific. Recognition. He knew exactly what I meant and he didn't pretend otherwise for even 1 second, which I registered as important. We weren't, he started. It was before. I know. I kept my voice level. We weren't together. It was 2 years ago. It was one time and it was over and it doesn't change anything that's happened between us. I held his gaze. That's not why I'm saying it. He looked at me for a long moment. I watched him work through it. Watched him find the real meaning under the words the way he'd gotten good at doing over the last 2 months, or maybe the way he'd always been able to do it and had been choosing not to until now. I edited it, he said. Yes. Not because it mattered. Because you were deciding what to show me. I said it without accusation. It was just the truth and we were both standing in it. The same thing you always do. The same thing you said you were trying to stop. He looked at the ground. I'm not angry, I said. I want to be really clear that I'm not angry. But Cole, I waited until he looked up. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I can't be another audience. I can't be someone you manage the story for. I need the actual version or it doesn't work. I know. Do you? Yes. He said it with something underneath it, weight, conviction, the particular way he said things when he meant them without rehearsal. I know. And I know that saying I know isn't enough. I know that too. I looked at him for a second. There it was, the thing that was always the problem with Cole Mercer. He understood things very quickly and very deeply and the understanding was genuine. That wasn't in doubt. What was in doubt was the distance between understanding and the habit of a lifetime. Practice what you said to me on the roof, I said. He waited. You said you wanted to find out if you still loved it when nobody was watching. When it was just you and the ice and a reason you actually chose. I picked up my bag strap. Try that with me. No performance. No managed version. Just, what's actually there. He stood in the cold in his training clothes and looked at me with that open expression, the one that had no armor in it. Rare and specific and more real than anything else about him. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, that scares me more than the shoulder. I know it does, I said. Do it anyway. I walked past him. I got 20 yards before his voice came behind me, quiet enough that it almost dissolved in the cold air. Avery. I turned. He was still standing in the same spot, one hand in his pocket, bag still on his shoulder. I'm going to be better at it, he said. I leaned back against the wall behind the equipment box and looked at the ceiling, the old wood beams, the dust, the faint light from the rink below seeping through the gaps in the floor. I could hear the Zamboni running. I'm going to ask you something, I said. Okay. And you don't have to answer it. I'll tell you if I don't want to answer it. The notebook, I said. Juno told me about it. The pause was very small. Almost nothing. Juno has a large mouth. She told me there was one. Didn't tell me what was in it. I looked at her. What's in it? She held my gaze for a second. Then she reached into her bag and took out a notebook, black cover, no label, and held it for a moment. She looked at it the way people looked at things before they did something they couldn't undo. She opened to a page near the middle. Held it out. I took it. 3 pages. Both sides, close writing. Her handwriting was very neat, small and upright, like it was used to being taken seriously. I started reading. She'd written about a game. Our junior year, home semifinal, we'd lost by 1 in overtime. I remembered the game. I didn't know she'd been there. She'd written about watching me skate to center ice for the handshake line after the buzzer, the way I went straight there, no detour, didn't touch the boards, didn't look at the bench, and shook every hand. And then how I'd stood at the edge of the circle for a second while the other team celebrated and how she'd had the strange feeling that I was the loneliest person in a full arena. I'd never told anyone that was how it felt. I hadn't even told myself clearly enough to use the word lonely. But that was exactly what it was. I kept reading. She'd written about the Frost vs. Millbrook game from the same year. About a play I'd made in the second period, a pass I'd chosen over a clear shot on goal, setting up a teammate who'd missed anyway, and the note she'd written was, he could have taken it himself. He was better positioned. He gave it away. I don't think he knows how telling that is. I sat with that one for a minute. The 3rd page was shorter. Just a few observations, fragments. Things like, he laughs differently when he thinks no one's watching. Less managed. And, I wonder if anyone has ever asked him what he wants and waited long enough for a real answer. I read to the bottom of the page. Then I went back and read from the top. When I looked up, she was watching me carefully. Her face was the most controlled I'd ever seen it, which, given that her face was usually fairly controlled, was saying something. You never used my name, I said. No. Why? She thought about it. Because naming it made it something different than what it was. What was it? She looked at me for a long moment. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I held the notebook out to her. She took it back and closed it and put it in her bag without looking at it. The Zamboni finished below us. The rink went quiet. The thing you wrote, I said. About the pass against Millbrook. About me giving it away. What about it? You're right. I didn't know that about myself until I read it just now. I looked at the floor. I'm not sure how to feel about that. About being seen. About someone watching close enough to see something I missed. She was quiet. Then, I've been watching you for 2 years and I didn't see the shoulder. I didn't want you to see the shoulder. But you wanted me to see the other parts. I thought about that, really thought about it, the honest version. I didn't know I did, I said. Until right now. The light from the rink below shifted, someone had turned on the overhead work lights, flooding everything cold and white through the floor gaps. The loft felt smaller suddenly. Not uncomfortable. Just close. She opened her work notebook, the labeled one, and picked up her pen. Is it okay if I write that? She said. I looked at her. The pen hovered. Yeah, I said. Write it. She wrote it. And I sat there watching her write something true about me and I didn't have the urge to correct it or manage it or walk it back. That was new. That was so new it almost scared me. Almost. End of. Chapter 19. Avery. It started on a Friday. 48 hours. I know it was exactly 48 because I kept looking at the clock and the clock kept telling me new terrible things. Friday, 11 a.m. My phone rang. National Journalism Committee, the woman who ran the student division, a name I'd been hoping to hear from all semester. She was warm and professional, and she told me the committee had reviewed my submitted draft and they loved it. She used the word compelling twice. She asked if there was any chance of additional depth before the final submission window. What kind of additional depth? I said. Something bolder, she said. The piece you submitted is excellent, but it reads like a writer who found the door and stood outside it. The work that wins this award is the work that went through. I knew what she meant. I thanked her. Told her I'd consider it. Hung up. Opened my laptop. Opened the folder labeled Other. Looked at the notes I hadn't used. The shoulder sessions. The tape job. The X-rays in the recycling bin. The conversation with Hargrove through the cracked door, all of it, 6 weeks of the real story sitting in a folder under a one-word label. I stared at it for 4 minutes. Then I closed the folder. Then I opened it again. I made a new document. Typed 3 lines of a new opening, not the rink and 3 words version, a different version, the version that started with the recycling bin and the X-ray film against the corridor light. I read those 3 lines back. They were the best 3 lines I'd written all semester. I closed the document without saving. Pressed my palms flat on the desk. The thing was, and I'd been sitting with this for weeks, turning it over from every angle I had, the thing was that publishing the injury story wasn't wrong. Not ethically, not journalistically. Cole was a public figure at this school, the injury was relevant, the story of a captain playing through serious pain while his coach quietly exploited it was the real story, and I knew it. Petra knew it. The committee knew it, in the intuitive way they knew things without knowing the specifics. But I'd made a deal. And the deal wasn't just professional anymore. It hadn't been just professional in a long time, and sitting at my desk at 11:15 on a Friday morning pretending otherwise was a specific kind of dishonesty I was tired of. I was trying to write about a person who was trying to stop editing himself. The least I could do was the same. I closed the laptop. Friday, 3 p.m. Juno knocked on my door. I opened it and looked at her face and said, "What?" "Senator Mercer is in the main hall." I'd known this was coming. Cole had told me his father would come eventually, the phone call in October, I'll find another way. I'd known. Knowing didn't make Juno's face easier to look at. Does Cole know? He knows now. I grabbed my jacket. I didn't go to the main hall. I wasn't part of that conversation, and I knew it. Whatever happened between Cole and his father was Cole's to have, alone, on his own terms, without me standing 2 feet away while he had it. That wasn't support. That was an audience, and he'd had enough audiences. I walked to the library and sat in our corner and waited. He texted me at 4:47. "Done. We'll explain later." "You okay?" I stared at that last part. "You okay?" In the middle of whatever had just happened in that room with his father, he'd texted "You okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine. Are you?" 3 dots. Then, "Not yet. Getting there." Friday, 6 p.m. Dex knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting him. Dex and I were friendly, but not the drop-by kind. We existed in each other's lives primarily through Cole and Juno. But he was standing in my doorway with his jacket on and his hands in his pockets and an expression that I recognized as the face people wore when they were about to do something they'd put off too long. "I need to tell Cole something tonight," he said. "Is he?" "He had a hard afternoon." "I know. That's why I need to tell him tonight and not 3 more weeks from now." He looked at the floor briefly. Then back at me. "His father came." "I know. Did Cole tell you about?" He stopped. "Chose a different way in. There are things I've been sitting on. About myself. About what I want. And every time I get close to saying them out loud, something happens and I use it as a reason to wait." His jaw tightened. "I'm tired of waiting. Does that make sense?" "Yes," I said. "Completely." He nodded. "Tell him I'm coming by at 9. He left. I closed my door and stood in the middle of my room and thought about all of it, the folder on my laptop and the phone call and Senator Mercer in the main hall and Dex's face in my doorway. The entire careful architecture of this semester pressing in from every side at once. Saturday, 10 a.m. Cole called. My father brought an enrollment form, he said. His voice was flat. Not hollow, just stripped. The voice that happened after a long night. Georgetown. Pre-law. Already filled out. A pause. He had my admission deferred. Without telling me. He called in a favor and got me a spot, and he sat across from me with the form on the table between us, and he said it was the responsible choice. I sat down on my bed. What did you say? I said I needed time to think. That's not no. It's not yes either. He exhaled. He said he'd be in town through the weekend. He's staying at the inn off the main road. He wants dinner Sunday. Outside my window the rink lights were on despite it being a Saturday morning. Always on. Dex came to see you last night. I said. Yeah. A different quality entered his voice, something heavier, something I couldn't fully read. He told me about art school. Oh. Portland. Full program. He applied in November and he got in 3 weeks ago, and he stopped. He's been carrying it alone for 3 weeks. What did you say to him? The silence was a second too long. Cole. What did you say? I said the wrong thing. Quiet and flat. I told him it wasn't the right time. That we had 6 games left and I needed him. That he could figure the rest out after. I closed my eyes. He left, Cole said. He just picked up his stuff and left without saying anything, and he hasn't responded to my texts. The game was that afternoon. 2 o'clock. Frost versus Penwick, a mid-table opponent we should have handled without difficulty. I got to the rink at 1:30 and sat in the lower press section and opened my notebook. I watched Cole skate warm-up laps. He was in his body but not behind his eyes. The mechanical version, all the correct motions, all the muscle memory, none of the thing I'd watched come alive over the last 6 weeks. The loosened thing was tight again. He moved like someone counting steps. Dex was on the ice and playing and not looking at Cole once in 20 minutes of warm-ups. In 4 years at Frost I had never seen them on the ice together without communicating constantly, looks, small gestures, the private language of 2 people who'd built something over a long time. The silence between them was loud. The game was bad. Not catastrophically, they still won, barely, by 1 in the 3rd. But Cole was off in a way that showed. 2 missed reads, 1 turnover that gifted Penwick their goal, a 3rd period where he was physically present and mentally somewhere a long way from the rink. I watched it happen and I felt it like something tearing slowly. I opened my notebook. I wrote nothing. The final buzzer went. The team moved through the motions of a win that felt like nothing. In the corridor afterward I stood against the wall with my recorder and I watched Cole come out of the locker room and I watched him scan the corridor and find me and I watched his face do the thing it did when he looked at me, and underneath all of it, underneath everything I felt when he looked at me, I thought about the open folder on my laptop. About the 3 lines I hadn't saved. About the deal and what it was costing both of us. He walked over. Don't, he said quietly. Not to me, to himself, I thought. Or maybe to all of it. Not tonight. Okay, I said. He looked at me for a long second. I said the wrong thing to Dex, he said. I know. I knew it while I was saying it. I know that too. He looked at the floor. I'm trying, Avery. I want you to know I know how it looks. From the outside. Dex and the form and Hargrove and all of it piling on at once. He looked up. I'm not going to let it bury me. I looked at him. At his face telling me something true without the machinery. I put my notebook in my bag. I know you're not, I said. He nodded once. Then he walked away down the corridor and I watched him go and I stood there with my empty hands and the worst feeling I'd had since January, the feeling of watching someone I cared about walk toward something hard and not being able to do anything except trust them to come back out the other side. I went back to my room. I opened the folder labeled Other. I looked at those 3 lines for a long time. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark and I thought about the woman on the phone saying the work that wins went through the door. I thought about Cole saying I'm still editing. I don't know how to stop. I thought about Avery Callahan telling him to practice. Then I thought about what it meant that I was still sitting outside a door of my own. Chapter 10. Coal. I found them on a Wednesday. I needed a hoodie. It's a stupid way for something important to start. I needed a hoodie, but that's how it happened. Dex had borrowed my gray one 2 weeks ago and hadn't returned it, and I was heading out to an early lecture in the cold and his door was unlocked, so I went in. His room was messier than mine. Not dirty, Dex was specific about certain things being clean, just full. Stacked books, sneakers lined up by the closet, his equipment bag taking up half the floor on the right side. The hoodie was on the back of his desk chair. I grabbed it and was turning to go when I knocked his gym bag off the chair beside the door and everything in the front pocket spilled. I picked it up automatically. Water bottle lid, AirPod case, a folded receipt, 2 pens. And a sketchbook. I put everything else back. I held the sketchbook. It was small, the kind that fit in a back pocket, worn at the corners, the black cover bent from being carried around. My name wasn't on it. There was nothing on the cover at all. I should have put it in the bag. I opened it instead. The first page was a drawing of the rink, our rink, Frost's rink, from an angle I recognized as the storage loft above the north end. Done in pencil, fine lines, the kind of careful you only got from doing something over and over until your hand learned the shapes by itself. Not a sketch the way someone doodled in a margin. A real drawing. I turned the page. The team in a huddle before a game. Individual faces visible enough that I could name every person without the numbers on the backs. Dex had captured something in each of them, the way Marcus always looked at the floor during a speech, the way Theo leaned left when he was nervous, the way I stood slightly apart even when I was in the middle. I turned again. And again. 20 pages. 30. The ice from angles nobody photographed. The locker room after a loss, empty, gear scattered, the feeling of a specific kind of silence made visible somehow. A page of hands, just hands, different sizes, all doing different things. A page that was only the view through the press box glass, and in the reflection, barely visible, a figure with a notebook. I stopped on that one for a second. Then I turned to the last used page. It was me. Not a game image, not Cole Mercer the captain, not Cole Mercer the player. Just me sitting on the bench in the corner of the locker room with my head tilted back against the wall and my eyes closed and one hand pressed flat against my shoulder. The position I went into when the pain was bad and I thought nobody was in the room. He'd seen it. He'd never said a word. I closed the sketchbook. I stood in Dex's room with it in my hands and I looked at it from the outside, this worn, carried, private thing, and I understood in a way I hadn't before that my best friend had been living a whole other life in the margins of this one. That the person I'd been skating next to and rooming next to and eating breakfast with for 4 years had this entire part of himself he'd never once brought into the space between us. I didn't know if I was angry or ashamed or just floored. I put the sketchbook back in the bag. Zipped it carefully. Put the bag exactly where it had fallen. I picked up the hoodie from the desk chair and left. Walked to my lecture. Sat in the back row and stared at the front of the room and retained exactly nothing for 50 minutes. Dex had talent. That was clear from 30 seconds with that book. Not casual talent, the kind that had direction and discipline behind it, the kind that didn't happen by accident. You didn't fill 30 pages with drawings like those without spending serious time and serious thought on the act of making them. And he'd never told me. I ran back through 4 years looking for the signs. The art history book on his shelf I'd assumed was for a class. The way he lingered near the windows in the library, the ones that faced the quad and the old chapel and the best natural light in the building. The times I'd knocked on his door and he'd taken 2 seconds too long to open it and the desk had been clear in a way that felt recently cleared. He'd been hiding it. Not just keeping it private, hiding it. Why? I walked back from the lecture and I almost knocked on his door 3 times that day. The first time I had my hand raised and I stopped because I didn't know what to do with what I knew yet. The second time I stood outside for a full minute before I went back to my room. The third time was late, after dinner, and I stood in the corridor and I thought about the drawing of me on the bench, the one where I thought I was alone, and I understood something. We were both doing it. Him with the art. Me with the shoulder. We were both carrying things we hadn't put down in front of the people who were supposed to be the ones we put things down in front of. I went back to my room. Lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The sketchbook sat in my head like a stone. Heavy, specific, the kind of thing that changed the shape of something once you knew it was there. What did Dex want? Not from hockey, I'd never asked. I'd assumed the answer was the same as mine, the team, the game, the trajectory that started at Frost and ended somewhere professional and earned. I'd assumed that because I'd never made space for any other answer to exist. That thought sat with the stone. Made it heavier. I pulled out my phone. Typed and deleted 2 messages to Dex. Put the phone face down on my chest. The building was quiet. Down the hall someone's speaker played something low and distant. The radiator ticked. Dex had a whole self I hadn't known about. The question was, had I ever really looked? Or had I just been so busy being the person everyone needed me to be that I'd stopped actually seeing the people around me? I didn't answer that tonight. I wasn't ready for the answer tonight. I put the hoodie on and turned off the light and lay in the dark and thought about 30 pages of a life I'd been living next to without seeing. Chapter 11. Avery. The first draft was good. That was the problem. I sent it to Petra at 11:30 on a Thursday night after 6 weeks of reporting, 4 formal interviews with Cole, 7 games attended, 24 pages of notes, and approximately 100 conversations with myself about objectivity. I sat back in my chair and read it through one final time before I hit send. It was genuinely good. Sharp, clean, structured well. It opened on the first interview, the empty rink, the 3-word answer, and it moved through the season with momentum, building toward the championship run, using Cole as the lens through which the whole story focused. The writing was the best I'd done. The quotes landed. The rhythm held. I sent it. Then I made tea. Came back to my desk. Read it again. And I knew. I'd known while I was writing it, but I'd told myself it was nerves, told myself it was the usual feeling of a piece being too close to be judged clearly. But reading it again with fresh eyes at 11:45 at night, I knew with the same certainty I knew anything, the piece was good and it was a lie. Not a factual lie. Everything in it was true. Dates, quotes, records, context, all accurate. The lie was structural. It was what I'd left out, and what I'd left out was the only part of Cole Mercer that made everything else make sense. The shoulder. Without the shoulder, the story was about a talented captain leading his team through a final season. Inspiring. Clean. The kind of thing that won student journalism awards because it was well executed and emotionally accessible and required nothing difficult from anyone. With the shoulder, the story was about a person choosing pain over truth, every single day, because the thing he'd built his entire life on was ending and he couldn't let it end one day sooner than it had to. With the shoulder, the story was about what it cost to hold a team together when you were the thing most in need of care. With the shoulder, Cole Mercer became someone real. Without it, he was a very good subject. I sat with that distinction for a while. My phone rang at 11 past midnight. Petra. It's brilliant, she said when I picked up. No preamble, no greeting. The opening is the best thing you've written for this paper. The committee is going to love this. Thank you. The section on the team dynamic in week 4, the part about the shift after the new coach arrived, that's the standout. That's what gets reprinted. Good. She paused. She had good instincts, Petra, that was why she was the best editor I'd worked with. She heard what wasn't being said almost as well as what was. What's wrong? Nothing. Avery. I pressed my fingers against the bridge of my nose. It's missing something. What's missing? Be specific. I can't be specific. Another pause. The subject. Cole Mercer. I said nothing. You're protecting him, she said. Not accusatory, just clear. Petra made pronouncements the way other people stated facts. There's something you found and you're not putting it in. I have a story I'm proud of and I sent it to you. You have a story you're proud of that reads like it has a door you didn't open. She let that sit. I'm not going to push you on it tonight. But Avery, whatever's on the other side of that door is where the real peace lives and you know it. She said goodnight and hung up. I put my phone down. I opened the folder on my laptop, the one labeled Other, and I looked at the notes I hadn't put in the piece. The morning tape sessions. The way he exhaled slow and deliberate before he let the shoulder do anything strenuous. The 3 times I'd watched him come off the bench during a drill and press one hand flat against the joint in the exact position I'd seen in the drawing Juno described, the one from Dex's sketchbook she'd told me about in that offhand way of hers, not realizing what it meant. I'd built a story around what I was willing to say. I'd left the true story in a folder labeled Other. I pushed back from my desk and went to the window. The rink was dark tonight, it was past midnight, and even Cole Mercer slept occasionally. The campus was quiet, the stone buildings lit faint gold at their bases by the footpath lights, the January cold visible on the glass when I put my palm flat against it. He'd trusted me with the real version. That was the deal. He gave me access, I protected the shoulder. I'd made that deal with clear eyes and I didn't regret it. But Petra was right, and I knew it in the same quiet way I knew most things that cost me something to admit. I wasn't just protecting the deal. I was protecting him. And there was a distance between those two things that a journalist couldn't afford and a person couldn't pretend wasn't there. I went back to my desk. I didn't open the work draft. I opened the black notebook instead, and I wrote for a long time, not the piece, not notes, just the thing I was actually working through. Writing about the deal and the draft, and Petra's voice saying whatever's on the other side of that door, and the feeling I'd had in the corridor after the Caldwell game when I'd written not yet and shown it to him like that was a normal thing between a journalist and her subject. At the end I wrote, the problem isn't that I can't write the real story. The problem is that writing the real story means deciding what I am to him first. And I don't know yet. And I'm running out of time to not know. I closed the notebook. Turned off the desk lamp. In the dark I sat and thought about 2 words in a work notebook. Not yet. I was starting to understand they meant more than one thing. End of Chapter 12. Cole. The first time I saw him I thought nothing of it. Gray jacket, end of the row, 3rd seat from the aisle. Older guy, 50s maybe, the kind of face that had been watching hockey for a long time and knew how to make itself unreadable. He didn't cheer. Didn't react when we scored. Just watched with his arms crossed and his eyes moving across the ice in that specific way, not following the puck, following the players. Reading positioning. Reading decisions. I filed it away and moved on. The second game he was in a different seat but the same section. Same jacket. Same posture. Same eyes that tracked movement the way cameras tracked movement, mechanically, without preference, taking in everything and giving nothing back. After the game I mentioned it to Dex. Probably a college scout, Dex said. Maybe. Or a parent. Some of those Caldwell guys are serious recruits. Maybe, I said again. But I knew what a college scout looked like. I'd had them in the stands since I was 15, and you learned the specific quality of that kind of attention, the way it was focused and impersonal at the same time. This was different. This was more patient. This was someone who already knew what they were looking at and had come to confirm something they'd already decided. The third game he was back. Same row. Different seat again. Like he was being careful about patterns and not quite careful enough. I waited until the end of practice the following Tuesday. The team had cleared out. Hargrove was still on the ice doing something with cones near the blue line. I skated over. Coach. He looked up. Mercer. Good session today. Thanks. I stopped at the boards. There's been a men at our last 3 games. Gray jacket, end section. You know who that is. Something happened in Hargrove's face. Very small, a half-second of something, and then the professional expression was back, clean and unreadable. We draw a good crowd, he said. I know what our crowd looks like. This guy isn't our crowd. Hargrove nodded slowly. Looked at the cones. Picked one up and set it down somewhere slightly different, like the position mattered. You're playing at a high level this season, Mercer. People notice that. It's a good thing. Who is he? I think your energy is best directed at the Millbrook game Friday. He looked up and his eyes were level and reasonable and told me exactly nothing. You've been reading plays early. Let's keep that momentum. He turned and skated back toward the far end. I stood at the boards and watched him go. He hadn't lied. That was the specific quality of what had just happened. He hadn't said anything false, hadn't denied anything directly. He'd just answered a question I hadn't asked and left the room. The way people move through conversations when they knew the truth was inconvenient and had gotten good at steering around it. I skated off the ice and sat in the locker room alone for a while. Someone was watching me. Hargrove knew who. Hargrove wasn't telling me. And Hargrove had told me on his first day that this season was about me, not the team, not the program, me, and at the time I hadn't been able to name what was wrong with that. I was starting to be able to name it. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call anyone. I sat there with it in my hand and I thought through it carefully: the gray jacket, the 3 games, Hargrove's non-answer, the private morning skates, the way Hargrove had been pushing individual showcase plays in practice lately. Plays that looked good on tape for a single player. Plays that broke the team's system if you were paying attention to the system. I'd been paying attention to the system. I was the captain. It was my job to pay attention to the system. And I'd noticed things I'd let myself not notice because I was already carrying enough, and adding one more thing felt like adding weight to a shoulder that was already at its limit. I put the phone away. Laced my shoes. Stood up. I didn't have proof of anything. I had a gray jacket and a non-answer and a feeling that had been building since week 1 that everything around me was being arranged in a pattern I hadn't agreed to. Friday's game first. Everything else after. I walked out into the cold and looked at the rink, at those lights, always on, reliable in that one specific way. I thought about Avery's folder labeled Other. About how she'd said the story she wanted to write was better than the story she could expose. I wondered if the same thing was true in reverse. If the truth I was sitting on was better handled in the light or left in the dark for 5 more weeks until the season was over and it didn't matter anymore. I walked back to the dorm. I didn't decide anything yet. But I stopped pretending everything was fine. Chapter 13. Avery. We beat Harwick by 4. That didn't happen. Harwick was second in the division and had a goalie with a save percentage that made coaches physically uncomfortable to look at. Frost hadn't beaten them by more than 1 in 6 years of trying. We beat them by 4 on a Friday night in front of the fullest home crowd of the season, and by the final buzzer the rink was the loudest I'd ever heard it. I was in the press section trying to write and failing entirely. Cole had 3 assists and 1 goal and played the kind of game that made the crowd stop and pay attention in the middle of it, not just at the highlights, but at the connective tissue between them. The reads. The moments where he could have taken the shot and fed it wide instead because he'd already seen 2 plays ahead. I wrote 6 lines in 60 minutes of play. The other time I was just watching. After the game the team went loud in the corridor. Dex was singing something badly and Marcus was yelling over him, and even the freshmen who usually stayed quiet in big moments were fully in it. I stood against the wall with my recorder and got quotes and kept everything professional, and then Cole came out of the locker room and found me the way he always found me now, direct, no search, like he had a location on me that I hadn't given him. "Roof," he said. "I have quotes to file." "File them from up there." He walked past me toward the back stairwell. I filed them from up there. The roof of the main hall was a senior tradition I'd known about for 2 years and never participated in because I was always working. It was accessible through the 4th-floor maintenance door that 3 generations of Frost seniors had figured out how to prop open, and it was flat and wide and faced east toward the tree line, and on a clear night you could see the lights of the nearest town about 8 miles out like a distant idea of somewhere else. It was cold. We were both underdressed for it. I had my jacket and he had his team hoodie, and neither of us mentioned the temperature. We sat on the low wall at the east edge with our legs hanging over the safe side. Below us the campus was still lit and moving, people streaming out of the rink, voices carrying up. From up here it all looked manageable. Like a thing you could put in your hand and examine. 3 assists, I said. 4. The last one got called off the official record on a penalty. 4 assists and a goal. Millbrook next week is going to be harder. Let me write the Harwick story first. He smiled. Looking out, not at me. Yeah. Sorry. We were quiet for a while. Below us someone was laughing, that carrying laugh that happened after wins, the kind with no ceiling to it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You always ask if you can ask. Just ask." "Why journalism?" I thought about the short answer and skipped it. When I was 12, my school was going to cut the arts program. Budget thing. Everybody was upset about it, but nothing was happening. So I wrote a piece for the local paper, my mum knew the editor, about what the program meant, what it gave specific kids. I interviewed 6 people. Wrote it up. The paper ran it. I looked at the tree line. The program didn't get cut. Because of the piece? I don't know. Maybe not entirely. But the piece made it real in a way the complaining hadn't. It put names on it. I paused. I figured out then that writing was how I made things matter. How I made people see things they were already looking at but not actually seeing. He was listening the way he listened, fully, no performance, like what you were saying was the only thing in the room. That's why the profile matters to you, he said. Not the award. The award matters. Not as much. I looked at him. He looked back. Not as much, I said. The notebook, he said. The black one. Have you been keeping it long? Since I was 14. Different ones over the years. I pulled my jacket tighter. I have a shelf of them. 14 of them now. I don't publish what's in them. They're not for that. What are they for? For the version of things I'm not ready to say out loud yet. He was quiet for a moment. I've never had anything like that, he said. Somewhere to put the version you're not ready to say. What do you do with it instead? Skate it out. He looked down at his hands on the wall. Or I just carry it until it gets heavy enough that I have to put it down somewhere. Is it heavy right now? He took a breath. Held it a second. There's a man who's been at our last 3 games, he said. Gray jacket. Hargrove knows who he is and won't tell me. And Hargrove has been running me through individual showcase drills in the early sessions and adjusting team plays in ways that don't make sense for the team but make sense if you're building a highlight package for a specific player. He'd never said any of this to me before. I stayed still. And my father called yesterday, he continued. Didn't leave a message. He hasn't called since September. He only calls when he's decided something. What has he decided? I don't know yet. I'm going to find out and I don't want to. Below us the crowd was thinning. The rink lights were still burning through the windows, throwing long rectangles of white across the snow. The campus was beginning to quiet down. I said, what do you actually want? After graduation. Not what your father wants, not what the program expects. What you want. He looked at the tree line for a long time. I want to play because it means something, he said. Not because someone decided it was my path when I was 14 and I've been on it so long I can't see where the path ends and I begin. He exhaled. I want to find out if I still love this when nobody's watching. When there's no season, no banner, no captain, when it's just me and the ice and a reason I actually chose. I didn't write it down. There was no notebook out. This wasn't that. That's the most honest thing you've said to me, I said. Yeah. His voice was quieter. Don't put that in the piece. I won't. He turned his head and looked at me. We were close, the wall was narrow and we'd been sitting on it for 20 minutes and somewhere in those 20 minutes the space between us had changed without either of us managing it. I was aware of it the same way you were aware of weather, not all at once, just a gradual pressure that built until you couldn't pretend it wasn't there. He said my name. Not Callahan. Not Hay. My name. Avery. That was all. But the way he said it was the way people said things when they'd been not saying them for a long time and had finally run out of reasons. I didn't move. I didn't move away. He kissed me. It was not careful. It was not the tentative thing that happened between people who weren't sure yet, it was the kind that happened between people who had been sure for a while and had been running from it and had finally stopped running. His hand came up to the side of my face and I felt the cold of his fingers and then the warmth through it and I stopped thinking in sentences for what felt like a long time. When it ended we were still on the wall and the campus was quiet below us and neither of us said anything. He kept his forehead against mine for a second. Both of us just breathing. Then he pulled back. Looked at me. His expression was open in a way I hadn't seen before, no management, no performance, just him sitting with something that had happened and not yet deciding what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with it either. I should have said something smart. Something that framed it, contextualized it, gave us both a place to put it. I was a writer. Framing was what I did. I said nothing. We sat on the roof for another hour and talked about other things, the game, Dex's mood lately, a book I'd recommended 3 weeks ago that he'd actually read. Normal things. Easy things. Things that existed in the space after something had shifted without acknowledging the shift out loud. When we climbed back in through the maintenance door and walked down 4 flights of stairs and stopped at the second-floor junction where the corridors split, his hall right, mine left, he looked at me once. "Night," he said. "Night," I said back. I walked to my room. Sat on my bed. Did not open either notebook. Did not try to write anything. Just sat there in the quiet of my room with my jacket still on and my heart doing something I didn't have a clean word for. I thought about it every hour for the next 4 days. I know he did too because I watched his face in practice and saw the exact same thing on it that I felt every time our eyes happened to meet across a room. Neither of us brought it up. Not once. That was its own kind of answer. Chapter 15. Avery. I wasn't supposed to hear it. That's the part one keep coming back to, not what I heard, but the specific accident of it. Wrong corridor, wrong time, wrong door left 3 inches open by someone who thought the athletic wing was empty at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon. I was there to photograph the new team stats board for the online edition. Routine. The kind of thing I did without thinking, camera out, 10 minutes, done. I'd come down the back corridor because the main entrance had a group of freshmen doing some kind of orientation thing and I didn't want to route through it. The door to Hargrove's office was on my left. Cracked open. His voice came through it low and even, the voice he used for everything, the one that never changed temperature regardless of what he was saying. I should have kept walking. I stopped. Not because I was trying to listen. Because I heard a name I recognized and my feet made the decision before my brain finished the thought. Marcus Webb. I stood 2 feet from the door and I listened. The Millbrook game gave us exactly what we needed, Hargrove was saying. The third period especially. I can pull that cut by tomorrow. A pause. The other voice was tinny through a phone speaker, male, clipped, businesslike. What about the shoulder? Managed. He's playing through it and it doesn't show on tape. By the time anyone does medical due diligence, we're past the point where it matters for the offer. Another pause. Longer. The team's starting to notice the system changes, the phone voice said. They'll adjust. Mercer's their captain, they follow his lead. As long as he's performing, the team holds. Hargrove moved somewhere, I heard a chair, footsteps. 3 more games of this footage and you'll have everything you need for the pre-draft presentation. The instincts don't lie. Webb, this kid is exactly what you said he was. I pressed my back flat against the wall. My recorder was in my bag. Off. I thought about turning it on. I thought about it for 3 full seconds, the journalist part of me, the part that heard this is the story, this is the real story, this is what Petra meant when she said the door you didn't open, and then I thought about Cole closing his laptop in the weight room and saying I need to think, which he hadn't said yet but somehow I already knew he was going to say it, and I put my hand back in my bag without touching the recorder. I walked out of the athletic wing. I sat on the bench outside the library for 20 minutes and I turned it over in my head, all of it, every piece, the gray jacket and Hargrove's non-answers and the individual showcase drills and the plays that made no sense for the team but made perfect sense for a highlight package. It had been there the whole time. I'd had most of the pieces. I just hadn't wanted to finish the picture because finishing it meant something was happening to Cole that Cole didn't know about and that I now did. I went into the library at 5 o'clock. Cole was at his usual table near the back windows, laptop open, 2 books stacked beside him, the particular focused quiet he had when he was actually working rather than looking like he was working. He looked up when I sat down across from him. Started to say something about the Millbrook follow-up piece. I need to tell you something, I said. He read my face. Closed the laptop. I told him everything. Straight through, no editorializing, just what I heard and in what order. Hargrove's voice. Webb's name. 3 more games of footage. The shoulder, managed, doesn't show on tape, past the point where it matters. I laid it out the way I'd write a lead, most important first, then the detail, then the implication. He was very still while I talked. Not frozen, he was breathing, he was present, he was tracking every word. But the kind of still that happened when someone was containing something that would be large if it got out. I'd seen it once before, the morning I showed him the X-rays. When I finished there was a silence. He looked at the closed laptop. "How long?" he said. "I don't know." The way Webb talked about the footage, at least 3 games, maybe more. The whole season. Possibly. He put both hands flat on the table. Looked at them. "Hargrove said the season was about me," he said. "Not angry, something more complicated than angry. First day. I told you about that." "I remember." "I thought it was, I thought he meant the work. The performance. I thought it was a coaching philosophy thing." He let out a breath. Slow. Like he was letting out more than air. He meant it literally. The season was about me. My footage. My market value. Nothing to do with the team or the program or any of it. Cole. The play changes. He said it quietly. The ones I thought didn't make sense. The ones Marcus and Theo have been frustrated about for 3 weeks. They weren't strategy adjustments. He looked up. He was clearing the lane. Making room in the play so I had more individual moments. More tape. The library hummed around us. Someone at the next table turned a page. "Do you know what Marcus Webb does?" he asked. "NHL scouting. Pre-draft assessments." He nodded. Like he'd already suspected this, and hearing it confirmed was worse than not knowing. That specific kind of worse. "My father," he said. "What about him?" "He said he'd find another way." He was staring at the table, at his hands. "That was in October, when I told him I wasn't interested in the Georgetown application. He said, 'I'll find another way to secure your future.' I thought he meant the law school thing. Another school, different application." He stopped. "He meant this." The word sat between us. "You think your father is connected to Webb?" I said. "My father is connected to everyone. That's what he does, he builds the structure around the thing he wants and then he waits for the thing to step into it." His voice was flat. Not cold, not loud, just stripped of the usual management. Pure and level. He doesn't push. He arranges. He arranges until the path he chose for you is the only visible path, and then he acts surprised when you take it. He pushed back from the table. Stood up. Picked up the laptop, held it in one hand. "I need to think," he said. "I know." He looked at me for a second, really looked, the same way he looked when something mattered enough that he stopped filtering it. "Thank you for telling me." "Of course. You could have used it." "I know that too." Something in his face shifted. Small but real. "I'll call you tonight." He walked out. I sat at the library table with my hands in my lap and the weight of everything I knew pressing down on the afternoon. Outside the window the campus was doing its normal early evening thing, people crossing the quad, lights in the dormitory windows, the rink burning bright at the far end like it always did. I opened my work notebook. I looked at the blank page for a long time. Then I closed it. Some things I wasn't ready to write yet. The writing came after the feeling, and the feeling wasn't done yet. Not close to done. I sat there until the library lights shifted to evening mode and the table lamp came on automatically and the page was still blank in front of me. He called at 9:43. He didn't say much. Neither did I. But neither of us hung up first, and we stayed on the line until past midnight talking about everything except the thing, and that was its own kind of answer too. Chapter 18. Cole, what omission costs. Cole tries to explain. He makes it worse. Then he makes it slightly better by finally saying the thing he actually means, asterisk, I show you more than I've shown anyone. And I'm still editing. I don't know how to stop. Asterisk Avery, asterisk practice. Asterisk. Chapter 22. Cole and Avery. Cole. The night before, my father called at 8. I let it ring twice. Then I answered because I decided 3 days ago that I was done with the version of myself that let things approach without moving toward them. Richard, I said. I hadn't called him Dad in 2 years. He'd never mentioned it. I need your answer by tomorrow, he said. No greeting, no preamble. Pure function. The Georgetown deferral has a deadline and I've extended it twice already. I know. You've had the form for a week. I know that too. A pause. The kind he used when he was deciding whether to apply pressure or patience. He was good at both. He chose patience tonight. Cole. I have built everything around your future. Everything. You have a place guaranteed at one of the best law programs in the country. You have an NHL contact, one I put in place specifically so you had the option, not the obligation, and you have a gap year if you need it. I have left you every possible door open. His voice was level. Reasonable. The voice I'd grown up believing was the sound of someone who knew better. All I'm asking is that you walk through one of them. You chose the doors. I chose good doors. You chose them. I looked at the ceiling. That's the part that doesn't work for me. Not the doors themselves. That I didn't get to choose which ones to stand in front of. Silence. I'm not signing the Georgetown form, I said. I'll call you after the championship tomorrow. We can talk about what comes next. But I'm not signing it tonight and I'm not signing it tomorrow and I need you to hear that clearly so we can stop having this conversation. Another silence. Longer. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe. It'll be mine. He hung up. I put the phone down and sat in the quiet of my room and waited for the guilt to arrive. It always arrived after that kind of call, the specific guilt of disappointing a person who had organized their life around a version of you that you decided to stop being. It arrived. I sat with it. It didn't change anything. I retaped my shoulder. Put my gear bag by the door. Turned off the light. Didn't sleep for a long time. But when I did it was clean and still, and when I woke up at 6 the shoulder was a 4 and the ceiling was the same ceiling and the championship was today. That was enough to start with. Avery. At 10 in the morning my phone rang. The committee woman. I knew before I answered. Final submission window closes tonight, she said. I wanted to reach out personally. Whatever you decide to submit, we're ready for it. I have something, I said. The revised version. A different version entirely. She paused. Bold. Yes. Then I look forward to it. She paused again, a warmer pause, more human. Callahan, whatever you turned in before was good. Whatever you're sitting on is better. I can hear it in your voice. She hung up. I opened my laptop. Opened real version. Read it through one last time. Start to finish. All 6,000 words of it. It was the right piece. I knew it the same way I knew things that were worth knowing, not with certainty, because certainty was for people who didn't understand how complex the truth was. With conviction. The kind that came from having sat with it long enough that it had become part of you. I thought about Cole last night saying I trust your judgment more than mine on this. About Petra saying the work that wins went through the door. About 2 years of a black notebook with no label. I hit submit at 10:47. Then I sat back and felt the specific silence of having done something that couldn't be undone. I got to the rink at noon. I had my notebook and my recorder and my press credentials, and for the first time all semester I also had nothing to prove and nowhere to hide, which turned out to be the most useful equipment I'd ever brought to a game. Cole. The rink was full by 1. Frost versus Millbrook in the division championship. Every seat taken, standing at the back, the family section packed. I could see my father from the tunnel entrance, front row, center, the seat of a man who had arranged to be exactly where he expected to matter. He was watching the ice warm up. He saw me see him. Neither of us waved. I went back into the locker room. The team was quiet in the way teams went quiet before something large. Not scared, focused. The particular internal gathering that happened when a group of people had decided something together without saying it out loud. Dex was across the room, taping his wrists. He caught my eye and held it for a second. Nothing communicated explicitly. Just, I'm here. We're here. Let's go. Liam Croft was in the corner with his helmet on already, visor down, doing whatever he did to get ready. I'd spent 2 weeks with him at 6 in the morning running plays and reading ice and talking about the game the way I'd never talked about it with anyone except Dex. He was going to be very good. He was already good. The question wasn't whether he had what it took. The question was whether I was ready to acknowledge it the way it deserved to be acknowledged. I stood at the front of the room. The team went quiet. I'm not going to give the speech, I said. Some heads came up. You know what we're doing. You know why we're here. You know what this team is. I've watched you figure that out all season and I don't need to tell you what you already know. I looked around the room. At Marcus. At Theo. At Dex. At Liam in the corner with his visor down. Play for the person beside you. That's it. Everything else follows from that. I put my helmet on. Let's go. The first period was tight. Millbrook was good, disciplined, physical, the kind of team that made you earn every inch. We traded shots, traded hits, nobody scored. I played in the system, the real system, the one we'd run for 3 years before Hargrove started quietly dismantling it. I'd talked to the team Wednesday morning, laid it out, told them what I knew. They'd been quiet while I talked and then Marcus had said so we run our system regardless and I'd said yes and that had been the whole conversation. My shoulder was a steady 4. Manageable. Second period, Millbrook scored first. The rink went different. Not panicked, the team had been here before. But sharper, the kind of edge that happened when something real was on the line and you had to decide whether the cost was worth it. I set up Marcus for the tying goal 7 minutes in. Heard the rink go loud. Found Avery in the lower press section from center ice. She was looking directly at me, not writing, and she gave me one small nod. I turned back to the play. Third period. 2 minutes left. Still tied. Millbrook broke out on a 3-on-2 and I came back hard on the coverage and their winger took me into the boards at full speed, left side, shoulder first, the exact impact the team doctor had spent months warning me about. I heard something that wasn't a crack but was close enough to adjacent that it didn't matter. I went down on one knee. The pain was a 10. Briefly and completely a 10. I got up. The whistle hadn't blown. Play was still live. I was on my feet and moving and the shoulder was screaming and I had the puck and there was 1 minute and 40 seconds on the clock and Millbrook's defense was back but there was a lane, not for me, I couldn't drive the lane at this speed with this shoulder without risking the thing that couldn't be risked. There was a lane for Liam Croft who had been cutting to the right post for 3 seconds and who I'd spent 2 weeks at 6 in the morning teaching to read exactly this situation. I looked at the lane. I looked at Liam. He was there. He was completely there, in exactly the right position, visor up now, eyes tracking the play, having read 2 moves ahead the way I'd shown him and then the way he'd made his own. I fed it. Clean, flat, precise. He took it without breaking stride and put it in the top right corner with 58 seconds left on the clock. The rink came apart. I stood at the right circle with my left arm pressed against my side and listened to the building lose its mind and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, maybe since I was 8 years old on an outdoor rink with no audience and no purpose except the pure animal joy of the thing. Liam skated past me. He grabbed my jersey briefly, couldn't do more without risking the shoulder he didn't know about, and his face behind the visor was everything I remembered from that age. Pure. Unheld. That was yours, he said. It was yours, I said back. Own it. The final buzzer went 58 seconds later. Frost won. The locker room after was loud and wet and warm and I stayed in it for about 3 minutes before I went to find Hargrove. He was in the tunnel entrance, not celebrating, watching the team with that measuring expression I now understood completely. Coach, I said. He looked at me. Something in his face knew already. I'm going to speak to the athletic director on Monday, I said. About Marcus Webb. About the individual sessions and the formation changes and what you've been building this season without the team's knowledge. I kept my voice even. I'm not going to do it tonight. Tonight is the team's. But Monday morning I'll be in the AD's office and I'll have documentation and I think you should probably expect that call. He was quiet for a moment. That reasonable, controlled face. Cole. I'm not asking for a conversation about it, I said. I just think you should know it's coming. I left him there. My father was in the main corridor outside the locker room. He was standing the way he always stood, straight, composed, the posture of someone accustomed to rooms knowing he was in them. He'd watched the game from the front row and his face was doing the complicated thing it did when an outcome matched his investment but not his plan. Remarkable game, he said. Thank you. That last pass was the right play. He looked at me. At the way my arm was sitting against my side. Your shoulder. It'll be fine. You should have it looked at tonight. I will. A pause. The corridor moved around us, players and families and the noise of a win. I'm not signing the Georgetown form, I said. I told you that last night. I need you to hear it in person so we're clear. His jaw tightened. The first real crack in the composure. I've spent 4 years. I know what you've spent. I know every piece of it. And I'm grateful for Frost and for the opportunities and for the fact that you cared enough to plan. I looked at him steadily. But the plan was yours. And I'm 18 years old and I need to find out what mine looks like. That's not ingratitude. That's just true. He looked at me for a long moment. You'll call me, he said finally. Not a question. A negotiation with himself. Yes. When you've decided something real. Yes. He nodded. Once. Put his hand out. I shook it, strange and formal and exactly the register our relationship lived in, and I was done pretending that wasn't sad. He walked toward the exit. I stood in the corridor and watched him go, and I waited for the familiar weight to settle back on my chest. It was lighter than it had been. Not gone. But lighter. I turned around. Avery was 10 feet away in the press corridor, bag over her shoulder, notebook against her chest, watching me with the expression she wore when she'd seen something she was going to need to write down eventually. I walked to her. She looked at my arm. How bad? Manageable. Cole. 6. I'll go to medical after. I stopped in front of her. The corridor was loud and full and I didn't care about any of it. I need to ask you something. Okay. The piece, I said. The real version. Did you? I submitted it this morning. I was quiet for a second. The whole thing. Everything. She held my gaze. The shoulder. The deal. Hargrove. What the season cost and what it gave. Everything. I stood there with that. With the fact that the real version was out in the world now, beyond both of us, doing whatever it was going to do. With the fact that she'd made that call herself, her call, her judgment, her trust in what the true story was worth. With the fact that it didn't scare me. Good, I said. She blinked. Good. Write the real version. That's what I told you. You wrote it. I looked at her. I meant it. She looked at me for a second with something moving across her face that she let move, didn't stop it, didn't manage it, just let it be visible. New. That was new. Your shoulder needs medical attention, she said. I know. Go. In a minute. I didn't move. After. She tilted her head slightly. After what? After this. I kissed her in the corridor outside the championship locker room with the noise of a win all around us and my shoulder at a solid 6 and 3 conversations I'd just had that I wasn't going to be able to take back and didn't want to. She kissed me back immediately, without deliberation, the way she did things when she'd already decided, completely, no hesitation, fully in it. When we pulled back she was looking at me with those clear eyes that saw everything and wrote everything and had been seeing me clearly since before I knew I needed to be seen. Now go to medical, she said. Yes, I said. I went. Chapter 21. Avery, the real story. Avery writes, not the profile she was assigned, but the real piece. She writes it without knowing if she'll publish it. She writes it because she's been a journalist for 4 years and the most important story of her time at Frost has been sitting in her hands and she owed it the truth. Chapter 23. Avery, after. The piece is submitted. Acceptances arrive. Decisions land. The year after graduation takes shape in different directions for all of them. Avery defers the fellowship. Not because of Cole, because she has more to say about Frost and she isn't done yet. The narrative must be told in first-person singular using I as the voice throughout. Keep the tone blunt, emotionally gripping, and realistic with no fancy grammar or complicated words. Use simple English vocabulary and straightforward sentence structures. Create a strong hook that instantly captures a first-time reader's attention. Include a powerful moment of conflict or suspense that sets the tone for the rest of the book. Prioritize dialogue over narration and use show-don't-tell techniques throughout. Write in paragraph format with left-aligned text and 1.15 line spacing. Make every character show emotion in a raw and believable way. Ensure each scene connects logically to the story world and character dynamics that will unfold in later chapters. Avoid repeating words and steer clear of overused phrases such as delve, elevate, embark, enhance, landscape, tapestry, comprehensive, dive, furthermore, interplay, journey, pivotal, resonate, showcasing, testament, vast, in summary, in conclusion, or any AI-sounding expressions. Focus on creating authentic human voices through dialogue and genuine emotional reactions. Build tension naturally through character interactions and conflicts rather than explanatory narration. End with forward momentum that makes readers need to continue to the next chapter. Chapter 24. Cole, the Last Skate. Graduation Day. The jersey retirement. For minutes alone on the ice. He comes off. Avery's hand. The bad shoulder. He doesn't flinch. They walk toward the bus. Summer ahead. Nothing decided yet except the important things. Epilogue should provide a satisfying conclusion, reflecting on the characters' journeys or transformations. Show more. February 26th. Search the web, viewed a file. Search the web, viewed a file. Now let me build this comprehensive story Bible as a Word document. Ran a command, created a file. Ran a command, created a file. Claude's response was interrupted. No doc. February 26th. Got it. Here is the complete Final Buzzer, Frost Academy Series Finale Story Bible in full. Final Buzzer. A Frost Academy Series Finale. Story Architecture. Protagonist. Cole Mercer, 18. Team Captain, Forward. The golden boy of Frost Academy who holds everyone together while quietly falling apart inside. His entire identity is wired to hockey, but a secret shoulder injury threatens everything. Magnetic, self-sacrificing, terrified of stillness. He spent 4 years becoming the guy everyone needs, and has no idea who he is without the jersey. Love interest. Avery Callahan, 18. Journalism major and the school paper's editor-in-chief. Sharp, guarded, emotionally precise. She came to Frost on a writing scholarship and has spent 4 years documenting everyone else's stories while refusing to live her own. She and Cole orbit each other like two stars that have been trying not to collide. Senior year makes avoidance impossible. Antagonist, external. Coach Dale Hargrove, the new head coach brought in mid-season after the beloved Coach Yates suffers a heart attack. Hargrove is clinical, political, and secretly feeding information to an NHL scout who wants to poach Cole before graduation, derailing the team's championship run in the process. Antagonist, internal. Cole's father, Senator Richard Mercer, a man who paid for Cole's Frost tuition on the condition that Cole goes pre-law after graduation. No NHL. No chasing dreams. He arrives late in the story with a contract and a quiet ultimatum. Supporting cast. Dex Navarro, Cole's best friend and team's enforcer. Secretly applying to art school across the country. Terrified to tell anyone. His arc is about learning that reinvention isn't betrayal. Juno Park, Avery's best friend and the team's athletic trainer. She's in love with Dex. She sees everything everyone is hiding. Liam Croft, sophomore phenom threatening to take Cole's captain position if word of the shoulder injury leaks. Not a villain, just hungry and honest about it. Maya Torres, graduated Frost alum who returns as a guest lecturer. Her secret, she and Cole had one night sophomore year that Avery doesn't know about, until she does. Setting. Frost Academy, an elite private boarding high school in upstate New York. Ice-kissed winters. Gothic stone buildings. A hockey rink that smells like ambition and cold metal. Senior year, January through May, the final stretch. The real world is visible from every window. Themes. Identity beyond performance. The cost of holding everyone else up. Letting yourself be seen before it's too late. Endings as the only honest beginning. Point of view. Dual first person, alternating by chapter, Cole and Avery. Their voices are distinct. Cole is instinctive, kinetic, thinks in motion. Avery is observational, precise, thinks in narrative arcs. The irony, she documents the world to control it, he performs for the world to survive in it. Tone. Emotionally raw beneath a controlled surface. Slow burn tension that breaks like ice underfoot, gradually, then all at once. Dialogue is quick, often cutting, rarely direct. Characters say almost what they mean. Think the edge of never meets all the bright places with the competitive pulse of Tilt the Stars, Wattpad. Sharp humor used as armor. Grief worn quietly. Love that embarrasses both people by existing. Full fiction structure. Act I, status quo/exposition. The world is Frost in January. The season has 12 games left. Cole tapes his shoulder alone in the locker room every morning before anyone arrives. Avery is writing her senior feature, a piece on what Frost Academy does to people, what it takes and what it gives back. She's been told it could win a National Student Journalism Award. She doesn't tell Cole she's been watching him for 2 years. Inciting incident, CH3 Avery is assigned to cover the hockey team's championship run for the paper. Cole is assigned to cooperate. Neither wants this. Both agree immediately. That first forced interview in the empty rink, her recorder between them on the bleachers, his answer to her first question, "What does Frost mean to you?" is just 3 words, it's almost over. She writes it down. Neither of them sleeps well that night. Act 2, Rising Action. Plot point I, CH7 Avery finds discarded X-rays in the athletic wing trash, Cole's shoulder. She doesn't publish it. She confronts him. He lies once, then stops mid-sentence and just looks at her. That's the first real crack. They make a deal she can't explain to her ethics professor, she protects the story. He gives her access to everything else. This is a terrible idea and they both know it. Midpoint, CH13 the night after Frost's biggest win of the season, Cole and Avery end up on the roof of the main hall, a senior tradition. He tells her something true for the first time, I don't know what I am off the ice. I genuinely don't know. She tells him something true back, I've been writing about you since sophomore year. Not for the paper. Just, writing. A beat. He doesn't say anything. She wishes he would. He kisses her instead. It is not a small kiss. She doesn't write that night. Neither does she regret it. Plot twist number 1, CH15 Coach Hargrove calls Cole into his office and reveals that an NHL scout, Marcus Webb, has been watching Cole all season and wants to offer a pre-draft contract. Hargrove frames it as an opportunity. Cole realizes Hargrove has been designing situations to showcase Cole individually, breaking the team's system in the process. 3 players have complained about new strategy changes that don't make sense. They do make sense, just not for the team. Plot twist number 2, CH17 Maya Torres returns for a guest lecture on sports journalism. She and Avery hit it off immediately, until Juno, who knows everything, goes quiet in a way that tells Avery everything. One quiet conversation in the bathroom and Maya confirms, sophomore year. One night. Cole never told Avery because there was nothing to tell, they weren't together then. But Avery's piece of the story is now different than she thought it was. The trust crack isn't about betrayal. It's about omission. It's about how Cole edits what he shows her even now. Plot point 2, all is lost, CH19 3 things collapse in a single 48 hours. Cole's father, Senator Mercer, arrives at Frost and hands Cole a pre-law enrollment form for Georgetown, already filled out. Avery's editor at the national competition asks her to submit something bold, something that would win. Avery's notes on Cole, the injury, the secret, the real story, are sitting in a folder on her laptop. She opens it. She closes it. Then her editor calls again. Dex confesses to Cole about art school. Cole, instead of supporting him, says the wrong thing. You can't do that to the team right now, because Cole is underwater and Dex becomes collateral damage. Dex doesn't speak to him for 4 days. Cole plays the worst game of the season. Avery watches from the stands and writes nothing. Act 3, Climax/Resolution. Climax, CH22, championship game plus simultaneous confrontations the night before the championship. Senator Mercer gives Cole a deadline. Avery tells Cole she didn't submit the story, but she could have, and she needs him to understand what that means. She chose him over the win, and she needs him to choose something true for himself in return. Dex shows up at Cole's door at midnight with his art school portfolio and says nothing, just leaves it there. Cole reads every page. Championship day. Cole's shoulder is at 60%. He plays. Fourth period, tied game. Cole takes a hit that genuinely jeopardizes the shoulder, and instead of pulling himself, he passes. Sets up Liam Croft for the game-winning goal. Deliberately. It is the most important hockey decision of his life, and it isn't about hockey. Frost wins. In the locker room, Cole tells Coach Hargrove that he won't be taking Marcus Webb's call. He tells his father he needs 1 year to decide. He finds Avery in the press corridor, ice damp and shaking slightly, and says, "Write whatever you need to write. Write the real version. I want people to know it wasn't perfect." She doesn't write the injury piece. She writes something better, about what it costs to carry a team, a season, a future someone else designed. It wins. Falling action, CH23. Acceptances and decisions arrive. Dex is going to art school in Portland. Juno gets into the physical therapy graduate program she'd applied for secretly. Avery defers a journalism fellowship in New York by 1 semester. Cole tells his father no to Georgetown, yes to 1 gap year, and maybe to the NHL, on his own terms, when his shoulder heals, if it heals. Nobody gets everything. Everyone gets something real. Resolution/denouement, CH24+. Author's note. Dear reader, thank you for spending your time with this story. When I first imagined these characters, I wanted to write about people who understand pressure, the kind that comes from the outside, from family, from expectations, and what happens when the walls they've built start cracking open. This story is about the courage it takes to be seen. Not the curated version. The real one. The messy, imperfect, terrified one. I hope that resonated with you. If this book made you feel something, I'd be grateful if you left a review. Reviews help readers find stories like this, and every one means the world to me. With gratitude. Fallon Greystone. Acknowledgements. Every book begins with a quiet question. I'm grateful to everyone who helped me find the answer. To my readers, you took a chance on this story, and I couldn't be more thankful. Your messages, your reviews, your enthusiasm, they fuel every late-night writing